What's up everybody, welcome back. So part 9 already of the AI guard tutorial, and today I want to take a look at a few different things. So the exclamation point icon above the guard head if he gets aware, and then the hearing perception. We're also going to take a look at setting up that one, and depending on how fast everything goes, we might also take a look at damage response and damage events. So yeah, that's today's video. If you like the series so far, please consider leaving a like. And if you want to get the project files for yourself to download, you can become a member of the YouTube channel or a Patreon, and then you will get access to premium channels in the Discord and also a download for the project files. And if you don't want to become a member, there are also a bunch of free projects in the Discord, so make sure to check it out anyway. So let's dive into today's video. So first of all, let's take a look at the awareness icon. I have a simple image of an exclamation point over here. You can download one from Google or go into Photoshop or Paint.net or whatever you use. Type in an exclamation mark, make it red and remove the background. So that shouldn't be too hard. And then you want to go into the actual guard character, so our pawn over here. And we're going to add it as a billboard component. So let's go to the viewport and let's add a component called a billboard. And let's call this our icon aware and set it up on the right side. So we want our exclamation point image over here, and then we want to raise it up. So I raised it about 130 units, so it's above the guard's head. And you can play around with the screen size, obviously. So let me see, I have it shrunken down a little bit. And I'm not even sure how I did that. Oh yeah, using the scale, obviously. So over here we can set the scale to 0.5, for example, and shrink it down. Nice, mate. Oh. So let's start with the exclamation point icon. I have downloaded one from Google, or you can go into Photoshop or Paint.net and just type in an exclamation point, make it red and remove the background. So that shouldn't be too hard. And then with a texture in place, we want to go into our character and simply add it as a component. So let's go to the viewport and we're going to add a billboard component like so. So let's call it the icon aware. And we want to change it into our exclamation point texture over here. So let's make sure it's above the guard's head. So I'm going to move it up a little bit and then shrink it down as well. So maybe half the size. Yeah, that looks pretty good to me. And by default, we want to make sure this is hidden in game. So make sure this is checked, but for a billboard, it should be by default. So this should be good to go. Now we want to create an interface function inside of our pawn interface. So let's go to the behavior folder and then open our AI pawn interface. We're going to add a new function and call this AI set aware icon visibility. And we're going to give it one input, and that's a boolean called the new visibility. Okay, that was nearly there. There we go. So compile and save it, and then if we go back into our character, we can set up the new function. So let's double click it. It's actually an event. And for this one, we are going to create a boolean that's a rep notify. So we're going to use that boolean as a trigger. So let's create a new variable and call this something like a trigger aware icon visibility. So we're going to turn it into a bool and then make sure it's replicated as a rep notify. Now we can simply drag it in over here and set it to the new visibility. And then we want to set up the rep notify function that is created for us. So we're going to open the function and then simply grab the icon aware from our components and set the visibility. So we want to set actor hidden in game in this case. Set hidden in game. And then we can grab our boolean. So that's the trigger that we're using. And we simply want to switch it around. So if we look for a not bool, then we can plug it into the hidden. So if it's visible, it's not hidden. So that should work. Compile and save that one. And then we want to go inside of our AI controller and set up a few small things. So let's open the AI controller. And inside of the event graph, so we have the event for starting the idle state and starting our aware state. So let's go over here. Start idle state, and at the end we simply can make our icon appear. So we want to hook that up to the completed pin and then grab our possessed pawn and call our interface. So that's AI set aware icon visibility. Plug it into the completed pin of the for each loop, and this is the idle state, so we want the visibility to be false. Then let's copy this part and go to the start aware state, and for this one at the end we can paste it in and make the visibility visible. So those should be good to go. And then we also have the start combat event. And we want to make sure if we start combat that we actually hide the icon again. And to be honest, the start combat event is on the pawn. So let's go back to the guard pawn, to the event graph. And in here we have start combat on the event graph. And we actually want to set the visibility over here in the multicast event that changes the material. So we're going to grab the aware icon and then set hidden in game. And in this case it's hidden, so we want to enable it over here. Okay, compile and save, and we should be ready to give this one a quick test. So running a quick 2-player game in here, and let's see if this one is working. So let's make sure that we are spotted by the guard, and then the icon should appear above its head. So that seems to be working, and the other player can see the icon as well, so he knows that AI is in an aware state, so that's good. And now as soon as the AI goes back to the idle state, the icon should disappear. And that seems to be working as well. Okay, so that was nice and easy and quickly set up. That's the aware icon done. Let's take a look at setting up the hearing perception. To add our hearing perception, we need to go into our AI controller where we have our perception component. We want to select the component and then we're going to add another sense to our senses. So we can simply click the plus sign over here. It will create a second index, and over here we can assign another sense. So in this case we're going to add the hearing sense as well. And with the sense added we can expand it and then set up a few things. So I'm going to decrease the range a little bit, but make sure that it's bigger than my sight radius. So let's make it equal to my loose sight radius maybe. So I'm going to set it to 2000, and then make sure that the detection by affiliation, you have all three of them checked. So that's working in Blueprints as well. We could set a maximum age, but we can get back to that later in the series. For now, I'm simply going to keep the maximum age at 0. So that's the setup for the hearing perception, and now we want to add it to our event in the event graph. So over here we have event target perception updated. This will fire whenever the perception perceives something or lost perception or things like that. And we're currently only checking the sight sense. So we want to add a branch in here that will also check our hearing sense. So let's add a little bit of room over here. And then we can hook up a second branch over here to the false pin. So that's the first branch that checks the class of the sense stimuli. And then we can drag off our class again and simply compare it to the hearing sense this time. So let's grab another compare node and we're going to look for the hearing sense. Plug that in as our condition. Then we can grab the stimuli from the event and break it down here as well. And from here we can get a little bit of information about the perceived sound. So if we expand it over here, the main thing we are interested in for sounds is the tag. So you can set up tags for the sound to identify what kind of sound it is. Is it a gunfire? Is it a friend screaming for help? Is it a bird chirping in the air? So you can identify the sounds using a tag. So we're going to do that for this one as well. We're going to drag off and compare the tag is equal to, and then simply call this gunfire. So we want to hook this one up to a second branch. And this is our condition. And then there's another thing I'm going to add, and that is a close hearing range. So basically, if the AI hears me fire a weapon far away, he will go and investigate that location. But if I'm only standing like 10 feet away from him and I'm firing my weapon, then he will go into combat state immediately. So I'm going to make a difference between that, and to make sure that we have that stored in a variable, we need to create it. So let's add a new variable, and that's my close hearing range. That's a float. And for my example project, I set it to 500 units. So obviously you can play around with it. But for now, I'm going to set it to 500 in here. Then we want to grab a third branch, hook this one up to the true pin, and we're going to grab the distance between the stimuli location and the receiver location. So drag off here and do a distance squared. So again, we're going to use squared distances because that's less intensive to calculate. So plug those in over here, and we know the distance between the actual gunshot and the AI that heard the gunshot. So we can compare this to our close sight range is less than or equal to, plug it in here and grab our close hearing range, but we want to multiply it with its. We are using a squared distance, so we're going to multiply and then plug in the result over here. So if we heard a gunshot inside of this range, then we're going to set the AI state. So drag off here, AI change state. So that's not the interface function, but the normal AI change state function. And in this case, we're going to set it to combat. And then if this is false, so if we heard a gunshot outside of our close hearing range, then we're going to set our state to aware. And in that case, we want to plug in the spotted actor from the event. So we can go all the way back to the beginning and grab the actor from the event perception updated. Okay, so this will make the hearing perception register sounds and make sure we trigger the correct states. Now we need to take a look at actually triggering those sounds. So I'm going to set up a weapon on our third person character and make sure that we can fire it. So this is kind of optional. If you already have a character in your project that is able to fire a weapon, then you should be good to go without following this part. But it does need to be set up to work in multiplayer, so the line trace should be replicated. So if you have doubts, make sure you follow the next part as well. First of all, we need to make sure we have an animation for the UE5 mannequin to be able to hold a weapon. So let's go to the animation starter pack folder, and in here I'm going to look for the idle rifle hip animation. Let's right click it, and we're going to retarget animation assets, duplicate and retarget. For the IK retargeter, we have one set up by default in the third person project. So we can use UE4 many to UE5 many. So grab this one. And then we should be good to go. So if we hit retarget, then we should have an idle rifle hip animation for the UE5 mannequin. Now we want to set it up in the animation blueprint. So let's go to the characters folder and then mannequins and then animations. So we want to go into the many blueprint and then dive into the animation graph. So I'm going to make it pretty simple. I'm just going to add a layered blend per bone inside of the locomotion nodes in here. So let's make a little bit of room. Drag off this one and look for a layered blend per bone. For the blend pose, we want to plug in the idle rifle hip animation that we just retargeted. So idle rifle hip. That's this one. This goes into the blend pose. We want to make sure that the animation is set to looping on the right side in the details panel. Then we want to select our layered blend per bone node and set up the branch filters. So on the right side over here, expand the layer setup till you get to the branch filters, and we want to add 3 of them. So we can expand all 3. And then the first one is going to be the thigh left bone. So thigh underscore L, and then the blend depth is going to be -1. The second one is the right thigh bone, so thigh underscore right. And again, the blend depth is -1. And the last one is going to be spine underscore 01. And we're going to set the blend depth to something like 3. That should work. And then we want to enable mesh space rotation blend over here to make it look a tiny bit better. So this is not going to be perfect, but this is just a placeholder so we can test something, so it's not really too important. So we have an idle rifle animation set up. We can close the animation blueprint. We want to add a socket to the skeleton as well. So let's go to meshes and open our SK mannequin skeleton. So for the preview settings, I'm going to select the idle rifle hip animation. So we want to change the preview controller to use a specific animation. And then we can look for the idle rifle hip again. I'm going to pause the animation so it's not moving around. And then add a socket to the right hand so we can attach the weapon to there. So let's look for the right hand in the list. And then right click and add a socket. So the hand R socket, well, let's call it hand R weapon socket, why not? If we right click it, we can go to preview assets and then attach our assault rifle, for example. And then we can see how we want to align it a little bit better. So I'm going to simply rotate it and move it a little bit better into the position of the hand. And again, this is just a placeholder, so I'm not going to worry about it too much. As long as it looks tiny bit decent, then I am fine with it. So something like this, that should do for now. So we have the socket in place. Then we probably want to remove the preview asset again. So let's right click and remove all attached assets. So that's out of the way. Save the skeleton and that should be good to go. Save selected. Now it's also pretty easy to have a little bit of a crosshair on screen, so we actually can hit something. So let's go to the third person blueprints folder, and in here I'm going to create a really simple user widget. So user interface widget blueprint, a user widget, and let's call this widget blueprint in-game HUD. So for this one, first of all, let's grab a canvas panel. So that's under the panel section and drag it in here. Then I'm going to grab a second canvas panel and drop it on top of there. I'm going to anchor the second one to the center of the screen and then position it 0, 0. The size is going to be 35, 35, and then alignment 0.5, 0.5. So it's centered in the screen. And then I'm gonna grab myself an image, drag it on top of the border, and we want to resize this a little bit. So let's make it roughly the size of one bar. So now we can say anchor it to the top middle over here, then position 0, and let's make the size 3 by 12, for example, and then the alignment 0.5, so it's centered. Now let's make this image red. And then I'm simply going to duplicate it. And for the second one, I'm going to anchor it to the bottom center and make sure that the position is zeroed out. And then we want to change the second alignment to 1, so it points inward. And again, we can duplicate it. And this time I'm going to anchor it to the right center. And then we want to switch things around. So we have the position 0, 0. Then this is going to be size 12 and this is 3. And then we want to move this one to 1 and the second alignment is 0.5. So you can see where this is going. The last one, duplicate it, anchor it to the left center, 0 it out. And then we want to switch this around so it's -1. 0. There we go. So we have a simple crosshair we can use as well. Close down the HUD, and now we can dive into our third-person character and set it up. So first of all, let's go to the viewport and let's add our weapon mesh component. So let's add a new component, and that's a skeletal mesh. And let's call this weapon, why not? And we want to attach it to our character mesh. So drag it on top of the character mesh. And then we can pick our parent socket over here. So that's our hand R weapon socket that we just created. And then it should snap into place, but we have location and rotation offsets. So if we zero those out, it should be centered. And then we can set it to something like a rifle, so we can see it's working. So we have a weapon mesh component. Then to make our aiming easier, we probably want to raise the camera boom a little bit. So right now, with the center of the screen, we're looking at the back of our character, so we cannot fire over his shoulder. So I'm simply going to raise the spring arm by 100 units. And that way I can actually fire at something else except my own back. So that's pretty useful. And then there's a few things we want to set up inside of the event graph. Let's open the event graph, and first of all make sure that our HUD appears. So we want to go to event begin play, and then right here at the end, after we added the context mapping, we can simply add our HUD widget. So this is not really how you should do it in an actual multiplayer game, but again, this is just a placeholder to test something. So I'm going to add a small delay in here of half a second or something like that, and then we're going to create a widget. And we want to create our in-game HUD widget. The owning player is the player controller that we can get from index 0. So get player controller. And then we want to add it to the viewport. So add to viewport. So not the most sophisticated setup, but this will work. Now to actually fire the weapon, and we want to make sure that the server is in charge of firing the weapon. All input events that are fired from the keyboard or the mouse are triggered by the local player, because that's the one controlling the character. So we have to make sure that they are replicated to the server instance. So we're going to create a custom event and call this one a server fire weapon. And let's give it one input, and that's our base damage. So simply to make testing a little bit easier, I want to be able to change the damage. So we want to turn it into a float. So this event is set to replicate run on server, and then we can add input events. So I'm not going to add actual input mappings. I'm just going to make simple click events. So if we right click and look for left mouse button, That's an event, and then I'm gonna look for the same node again, so left mouse button, but this time I'm gonna enable the shift bool over here. So if we have shift left mouse, then I'm gonna increase the damage, so we can easily test one-shot kills. So those should not alert any other enemies, for example, if they cannot hear them. So that's why I want to make a difference between there. So if we pressed it, we simply want to call server fire weapon. For the normal one, I'm going to set the base damage to 20 and then copy and paste it. And for the shift one, I'm going to set the base damage to 200. So we have a one-shot kill. Now let's set up the actual event. So for this, we want to do a line trace. So let's start by doing that. Drag off here and do a line trace by channel. And for now, we're simply going to use the visibility channel. That should be fine. We're going to start at the location of our camera. So let's drag in the follow camera and get the actor location. It's not an actor, sorry, it's a component. So get world location. Plug this one into the starting location. Then we want to get the forward vector from the camera. So drag off it again, get the forward vector. And we can multiply this, so we move it forward. Multiply it. Convert the lower pin to an integer and then raise the number to something like 100,000 or 10,000, depending on the size of the level you're in. And add these vectors together. So the world location of the camera added with the multiplied vector over here. That's the end location of the trace. Plug that one in over there. And then we can make it visible. So that might be useful. So let's grab the draw duration debug type and set it to duration. Okay. Now that's the actual aim trace that we're using. So for this one, So for this one, we're not going to set the visibility. This is the trace that we use to determine where we're going to fire. And then from this one, we're going to fire from the muzzle to the impact location of this trace. So we need to do a second line trace in here. Line trace by channel. And this time we want to grab the out hit from the first trace and we're going to break it. So we actually need to know if this is a blocking hit or not, but we can use a select node. So let me see. Let's start at the weapon muzzle location. That might be the easiest. So we can drag in our weapon component. From the weapon component, we're going to get a socket location. And we want to get the location of the muzzle. So in this case, that's called muzzle flash. So that's simply the name of the socket or the bone on the weapon. So depending on your weapon, the name might be different. This is the start location. We can plug it in over here. And we want to fire towards the end of this trace. And we're going to use a unit direction vector. So let's drag off the socket location and use a unit direction vector. That's the starting point. The end point we're going to drag off and use a select node. So select vector. Yeah, that should be fine. For pick A, we can plug in our blocking hit boolean. And then if this is true, so if it was a blocking hit, then we can use the location of the impact. If this is false, then we want to use the trace end. So plug that one into the B pin. So this should be the end location of the trace. Plug that one in over here. And then for this one, we can set the visibility so we can actually see where we're shooting at, sort of. So let's set the visibility over here to for duration. Okay, so that's the actual trace. Now let's make sure that we apply damage. So let's drag off our out hit and let's break it. And inside of the out hit, we have the hit actor. So we want to know if we hit an actor or not. So we're going to drag off and do an is valid check. And if the actor is valid, we're going to simply apply point damage. So we're going to use the default built-in damage system from Unreal. So drag off the hit actor again and look for the apply point damage event. Plug that one in over here. So the base damage, we're gonna grab it from the event. So go all the way to the beginning, base damage. Then for the hit from direction, I actually did a little bit of debugging and we simply want to get the unit direction vector. So if we grab the location over here, we can get the unit direction vector. And then we want to get it to the player that fired. So that's us. So we're going to get an actor location. And we simply want to get our own location and plug this one into the hit from direction. The hit info, we can pass it on from the trace. We don't need to worry about that. The event instigator, that's our player controller. So we can drag off and get player controller and simply get the one at index 0. And then we have the damage causer, and that's a reference to ourself. So that's an actor and the previous one was the player controller. So that should apply damage. And then let's see. Well, we could play something like a muzzle flash. So we can make an event for that. So let's do custom event. Call this weapon fired. And turn it into a multicast. So all the players can see the muzzle flash and hear the sounds and things like that. We need 2 inputs for this one. That's a location and that's a vector. And the second one is the rotation. That's also a vector. So then we can grab our weapon mesh component. And from here spawn an emitter attached. Plug it in over here. So the attach point name is the muzzle flash again. Depending on your weapon model, that might be different. So muzzle flash. Let's see, we have the emitter template and we can simply select the muzzle flash from the assault rifle pack. So that should be in there. And then we want to set the location type to snap to target, keep world scale. So that's a muzzle flash. Then we probably want to play a sound as well. So we could do something like play sound at location. Then for the location, we can drag off the weapon component and get the world location. And simply select the sound from the weapon pack. So rifle fire. And there should be a sound cue in there somewhere. So that's impact, impact, rifle lower. Let me see. So that's the sniper rifle. Yeah, that sounds good to me. And if we expand it, we could lower the volume a little bit, but do whatever you prefer. So this does not actually impact the hearing sense of the AI. We'll get back to that later. This is just the sound the players will hear. And then the last thing we might want to do is spawn an impact emitter. So again, spawn emitter, but this time at location. And then we can grab the location from the input and the rotation as well. So that will be converted automatically. And over here, use the assault rifle impact. No, that's not a rifle, that's a metal impact, for example. And then just pick one, it doesn't really matter. So we want to call this multicast event over here. So let's call weapon fired. And then we should be good to go if we plug in the location and the normal from our hit result. So before we test this, we want to go to our guard character, open it up, and make sure that our capsule component actually blocks the traces. So let's go to the capsule component, collision presets, and for the visibility over here, we need to make sure that we block it. So we're going to change the collision to custom, and then block the visibility channel so we can actually hit our AI. And then let's have a quick look if this is working. So let's hit play. And let's see what happens. So the tracing actually seems to be off. And that's for both the server and the client. So let me have a quick look to see what's wrong. I forgot a little something with the firing trace. So let's go to the third person character. We have the second trace over here, where we use the unit direction vector from the muzzle flash to the input location. And we actually want to add these vectors together. So right now I plugged it in directly into the endpoint. That doesn't work. We need to add this vector to the starting location. And first we want to multiply it, so we move it further away from us. I'm going to multiply the vector, turn it into an integer again, and make it something like 100,000 or 10,000, depending on the size of your level. Grab the socket location, add a vector to it, add the multiplied vector, and that's our end location of the trace. So now we should be able to fire at our crosshair. So let's compile and save and try again. So let's grab the client, and this time it seems to be working. So we have an impact at the correct location, and if we look at the server screen, you can see the trace actually goes in the correct direction. And we should be able to fire at the AI, and you should see impacts on the AI, so you can actually hit your AI character as well. So that's the most important part. Now we have something to test with. So now that we have all of this in place, we want to make it actually work with our hearing sense on the AI guard. So if we go inside of our character, after we fire the weapon, we can register a noise event. By the way, now that I scroll past this, we also want to hook up the not valid pin. So at the end, apply point damage. If this is not a valid character, we're still gonna play the muzzle flash and all that kind of stuff. So we simply want to bypass the point damage node and then plug it back in. And then at the end over here, we can report a noise event. So if we drag off and do report noise event, this will actually trigger the hearing perception on our AI. So we need to make sure this is called by the server, and we are calling this in our server event. So we should be good to go. The noise location, we can grab the actor location. So let's get actor location of the player that fired. So that's ourselves. And then we can set a maximum range in here. So this will not override the range inside of the hearing perception, but you can make it smaller if you want to. And the range is multiplied by the loudness. So you can read the description on how it actually works. For now, I'm going to set the range to 2000. So it's actually equal to the hearing range. And as long as we're in range, we should be able to hear it. The instigator is a reference to ourselves, so that's simply the actor that made the noise. And then we want to apply the tag over here as well. So inside of the AI controller, we use the gunfire tag, so the AI knows it's a gun that's being fired. So I'm not sure if I used a capital F or not, so let me double check that. I'm not 100% sure it's case sensitive, but let's just make sure that the tag is the same. So I have gunfire with capital F over here. So let me copy and paste it. So we have the same tag over here. So now it should work. So let's double check in game. And we can actually see our sight perception as well. If we enable the debugger and then our perception category, you can see the yellow line over here. That's the actual hearing range. So right now, if I fire, nothing happens. And inside of this range, it will trigger the hearing perception and the AI will come and investigate. So that actually seems to be working. Let's see if he also goes back to idle state, but that should be, because that's not something we changed in this episode. So that should be good. So we have hearing perception set up as well. And right now it doesn't actually trigger if it's returning back to idle, but we're gonna get back to that stuff later. That's going to be all for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to take a look at the damage response if we fire at an AI, and then also adding hit reaction and death animations, health, and things like that. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and I'll be back soon for more. Later, guys and girls. Bye bye.